What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 45 of Not What It Seems. So it's kind of sucks right now. Spring training is supposed to be going on. Obviously, it isn't. The latest between the CBA negotiations is, a deal between the owners and the players is supposed to be made by Monday, which is February 28th, in order to have opening day on March 31st. So they've been meeting every day this week. It still doesn't look like there's much traction going. But the ideal situation for the players and for the owners is to start spring training, let's say by March 5th. And then you have opening day on March 31st. That basically gives you about 3 weeks of spring training, a little bit more. That's still, maybe for some pitchers, it's not enough. But they're working out on their own. They're kind of all throwing bullpens, I'm assuming. Basically, we need a deal done though if we want to have a full 162 game schedule. Obviously, it's kind of out of the players' hands. I would say this is more so on the owners, on Rob Manfred, on not really the players. Obviously, the players want to play, and if opening day does not happen, the players won't get paid their full salaries, but neither will the owners, and neither will the league. Won't be making money. People won't be going to games. Um, Something we talked about is that basically they're going to lose a ton of young fans who are like just starting to get into the league, getting a fan of the league, whether they have loved Fernando Tatis past couple of years, Shohei Ohtani. They're up and coming, and if baseball's not going on, they're really going to move on to something else, because they're just not going to have any interest anymore, being it's not happening. Um, it's tough. We really hope that, let's say, by Monday they really have a deal in place soon, because I know we're all itching for baseball, and we're supposed to be seeing some games pretty soon. I believe last year the first day of spring training games may have been February 28th, actually. So um, just got to keep hoping, and there's going to be a huge free agent frenzy once the lockout's over. Obviously, it's a bunch of trades that are going to happen too. Excuse me. Can I get a little bit more into some trades later on, potential trades that could happen between some guys. But so moving on from that CBA stuff. So Mr. National, Ryan Zimmerman, has announced that he's going to retire. He played 16 seasons. Obviously, they were all with the Nationals. So he was actually the first overall pick in Nationals franchise history after they moved from Montreal. So yeah, I mean, 16 seasons there. His overall offensive stats: 277, 284 home runs, over 1,000 RBIs, over 800 OPS. He was really consistent. Obviously, he went through a couple of years where they were like transitioning him positional wise, from third to first. He kind of had some off years at third base. But still, I mean, his 162 game average, 277 batting average, 26 homers, 96 RBIs, and an 816 OPS. Also get around 4 stolen bases a year. So for a first baseman, third baseman, those are pretty solid numbers. I mean, maybe it's not, the 40 homers, 110 RBIs that we see maybe from those guys nowadays, but 96 RBIs, he was driving guys in all the time. And obviously he did win the World Series in 2019 with the Nats. That was their first World Series championship in franchise history. His overall postseason stats: so he played in 35 postseason games. Obviously, kind of over the past decade or so, the Nationals were in a ton of playoff games. So his postseason stats pretty much right on par with what his regular season stats are: 274 batting average, 5 homers, 17 RBIs, a 790 OPS. So he performed in the playoffs too. Everyone's really going to remember that 2019 World Series team. Every Nationals fan, whether it was the Howie Kendrick homer off the pole, Juan Soto was really good, but a rock in that lineup every single day was Ryan Zimmerman. Ryan Zimmerman, I think he had a couple of homers during that playoff run. So hell of a career by him. He also had two Silver Sluggers. He was a Gold Glover once. I believe that was at third base early on in his career. He was two-time All-Star. He finished in the top 25 MVP voting four times. His highest ranking was 16th in 2010. So never really super close, but yeah, this was a really class act guy. He's a guy that I'm always going to remember watching growing up, whether it was more recently or when he was back in the old Nationals uniforms. But really special connection between him and the DC fans. You think he got the World Series championship after all those years. He went through the tough times. He went through the Bryce Harper years, and then he won the World Series after Bryce Harper had left. So great career by Ryan Zimmerman, and we'll wish him the best in retirement. All right, so now we're going to move on to just some rosters of recent memory that probably should have won more than they did. So I'm going to look back on the 2016 Baltimore Orioles. So that season they finished 89 and 73. So they actually finished third in the AL East that year behind the Blue Jays. I believe the Blue Jays had 90 wins and the Yankees. Actually, no, the Red Sox might have been in first that year. The Yankees actually missed the playoffs in 2016. Um, but yeah, so the Orioles played the Blue Jays in the wild card game. They ended up losing in Toronto. Obviously, we all remember what happened when Buck Showalter didn't put Zach Britton in. Instead, he put Ubaldo. And the rest is kind of history there. But I really kind of want to dive deep into this team because it was a really, really solid team, man. They had Adam Jones in center field. This was kind of back in his prime. He played in 152 games, 265, 29 homers, 83 RBIs. This was actually they had Hyun Soo Kim was a Korean ball player. I don't know if he's still in the league, but this year was actually one of his better seasons. Played in 95 games, so a little banged up, but he hit 302. He had an 801 OPS. Then you had Manny Machado. This was kind of Machado was grown into his own here. Machado 294, 37 homers, 96 RBIs, 876 OPS. He was definitely the most consistent player on the team this season. But then you had Mark Trumbo. This was probably one of his best seasons of his career as well. Trumbo was pretty much playing right field. He would swap some time at DH, first base, but he hit 256, 47 homers, 108 RBIs, and an 850 OPS. I think statistically, this is easily Trumbo's best season in the league. Then you had Chris Davis, who this was kind of when he was falling off a little bit after the PED thing, whatever happened with that. But this year wasn't actually a terrible year by Davis. He did hit 221, but again, who really looks at batting average much nowadays? He hit 38 homers, he had 84 RBIs and a 792 OPS. So pretty solid season. He was hitting sixth. So, I'll take that from my six hitter for sure. Then you had Jonathan Scope, 267, 25 homers, 82 RBIs. Pedro Alvarez was also on this team. He played in 109 games. He had 22 homers and 826 OPS. Then you had Matt Wieters, who this was kind of on his downfall a little bit too, but he did pop 17 homers. He had an OPS of 711. Then you had JJ Hardy, who I think this was probably his worst season. I think he actually retired after this year. He had 9 homers, 716 OPS in 115 games, but he was a really good clubhouse guy. So was Wieters. So even their bottom two guys in the lineup, they were good in the clubhouse. Obviously, they were well known. So then you look at their starting rotation. So their starting rotation pretty much they had 2 horses and the rest not so much. So this was probably Kevin Gausman's breakout season. Gausman pitched in 30 games this season. He had a 3.61 ERA, 174 strikeouts, and 8.7 strikeouts per nine. Then you had Chris Tillman, who also started 30 games. Tillman had a 3.77 ERA, 140 strikeouts. So those two guys were pretty solid the whole season. Obviously, those aren't necessarily amazing ERAs, but having 2 top guys with ERAs below 4 was pretty solid for a team like Baltimore that plays in the bandbox like they do. Then you had Ubaldo, who pitched in 29 games. He had a 5.44 ERA. Not going to cut it. You had Giovanni Gallardo, a 5.42 ERA. Not going to cut it either. Then you had Tyler Wilson was a young guy they had in their rotation pretty much the whole season, 24 games. So probably didn't come up until about 2 months in. But excuse me, he had a 5.27 ERA. That's not going to cut it either. But again, they're pitching in a place like Baltimore, pitching in a places in the AL East like Yankee Stadium, Toronto, Fenway. Even Tampa is not the easiest place to pitch in. So um, Gossman and Tillman were pretty solid. I believe they pitched. I believe Tillman actually started the wild card game. I think Gossman might have had an appearance. I don't remember. Um, so the starting rotation was kind of the Achilles heel for this team. But then you look at their bullpen, and their bullpen is pretty much the complete opposite of that. They had Zach Britton. I think this was Britton's best season of his career. Britton had 47 saves. He had an ERA of 0.54. So I think he probably let up 1 or 2 runs the entire season, which is pretty amazing. He had 10 strikeouts per nine. Then you had Brad Brock, who also was amazing this season. He had a 2.05 ERA, 92 strikeouts, 10.5 strikeouts per nine. Michael Givens also, this was like his breakout season. He had a 3.13 ERA, 96 strikeouts, 11.6 strikeouts per nine. So he was striking out the most guys on the whole team in the bullpen, at least. So that was pretty, definitely his breakout. Then you had Darren O'Day, who had a 3.77 ERA, 11 strikeouts per nine. And then you had Vance Worley, who had a 3.53 ERA. So their bullpen was definitely not the problem. Um, Basically, I don't think you can win a championship with only 2 starting pitchers. I know nowadays we're kind of talking about the Brewers, like they have Woodruff, Burns, and then they have Peralta, but it's a lot more than that because they have Woodruff, Burns at the top 2, but then Peralta did break out last season. They got a couple guys at the back who were pretty solid. You can't have 3 guys in your rotation who have an ERA above 5. That's just not going to cut it, especially if you're trying to win in the playoffs. You need pitching. So, and their bench players, they had Nolan Reimold, probably lifetime Oriole, I think. Joey Rickard, all pretty solid guys. Ryan Flaherty. They also traded for Michael Bourne halfway through the season. So when he came over, he actually did pretty well. He had a 283 batting average, 2 homers, 8 RBIs, a 793 OPS. He was easily their best bench player. And actually, another weakness they had was at backup catcher. They had Caleb Joseph, backup catcher. He played in 49 games. So that's a chunk. That's a chunk of games right there. He only hit 174. He didn't have a home run or an RBI. He had a 413 OPS, no stolen bases. So, backup catcher isn't the biggest team member, but whenever he did play, he really didn't do anything. So that's kind of an issue they had as well. But yeah, I mean, the Orioles, if they would have beat the Blue Jays in that wild card game, who knows what would have happened, because this was an interesting postseason. This was the postseason where Bautista hit the homer against the Rangers in Game 5 in Toronto. It could have been Baltimore playing Texas, and it could have been Manny Machado hitting a walk-off homer instead. So pretty interesting here. But yeah, so the Orioles probably should have done better this season than they did, but it is what it is. And that roster was really good though. So moving on, we're gonna do a deep dive. I'm gonna predict some landing spots for according to myself, the best 10 players most likely to get traded either before the season or at this year's trade deadline. So the criteria is pretty simple. Contention on their current team, their previous season or two, not really going to count the COVID stuff. So like, let's say their previous full season before that, contractual status, obviously someone who has 5 or 6 years left on their contract probably is not likely to get traded, and their age. So I think the number one, actually, I'll start at 10. That way we go up a little bit. So I think that the Nationals are not going to contend this year. As much as I want to believe they will, they have Strasburg, Corbin, they have Soto. I just don't think the roster's there for them to contend, especially in that division where the Mets have bolstered up. The Marlins have a great pitching staff. The Braves just won the World Series. So I think that Josh Bell is probably going to be out of there. So actually, I think that Josh Bell is going to get traded to the Braves. Um, because I don't think Freddie Freeman is going to go back to Atlanta at this point. I think they would have probably gotten something done before the lockout started if he was going to be back. So I don't see the Braves going out there and trying to sign a big free agent necessarily. So I think that Josh Bell would really be a good fit in that lineup. He's a switch hitter. He actually had a pretty solid season last year. One of his best seasons of his career. It kind of got thrown under the rug because of how bad the Nationals actually were. But Josh Bell kind of had a bounce back last season. Obviously, in Pittsburgh, he had that one really good season. Otherwise, not so much. So I think him going to a playoff contender might help a little bit too. Excuse me. So yeah, I think Josh Bell would be a great fit with Atlanta. Nice switch hitter in the middle of the lineup with Ozzy Albies, Ronald Acuna. It would just give him a lot of opportunities to drive in runs. So Josh Bell, I think, is going to the Braves. Number 9, I have Ian Happ. Yeah, I mean, the Cubs have some pieces to me, but they don't have enough either. Obviously, like they're kind of stuck in the middle here, I feel like, because they just signed Stroman, they signed Yan Gomes, but uh, they traded everybody else at the deadline last year, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez. They have Contreras still, but Contreras could possibly be out of there at some point. He's the one guy who I feel like they may extend because he's a catcher. But yeah, I think Ian Happ is leaving the Cubs. I think Ian Happ would be a great fit in Philadelphia. Ian Happ has played center field. He's played left field, played right field. He's played some infield as well, but I think he would obviously be going over to Philly to play center. Switch hitter in that lineup would be a great table setter for like guys like Bryce Harper, Reese Hoskins. So I think that Ian Happ would definitely be a good fit in Philly. It's been obvious that the Phillies have needed a center fielder for a really long time. So I think Ian Happ will get out of there. He's not a free agent until 2024. I believe there may be a couple of options in there. I'm not positive though. So yeah, Ian Happ though, I think the Phillies, it would be a great fit. He's got a personality that would fit well with Bryce Harper too, if you've ever seen him in interviews. So number 8 for me, I got another guy from the Nationals getting traded. They actually just signed Cesar Hernandez. So another reason why I think the Nationals are going to sell though is because like this is a typical 1 year deal. They're probably going to trade him with the deadline, see what they can get. So Cesar Hernandez actually had his best season of his career last year with the White Sox power wise. He had the most home runs of his career. I believe he had the most RBIs as well. So I think Cesar Hernandez will go from the Nationals to the Brewers. The Brewers are a team that always seems to pick up these infielders that will just fit in well. They'll be able to play all over the place. Hernandez mostly plays second base, but if you throw him at third, I guarantee you he could play some third. He could probably play some first if you need him to also. The Brewers always they're going to be contending, obviously. So I think Hernandez will go at the deadline. I don't think he's one that will go before that just because they just signed him. Then I think Matt Chapman will go also. Number 7, I got Matt Chapman. You know, as much as this pains A's fans, I think they pretty much know it's coming. They're going to probably go on a fire sale once this lockout ends. Bob Melvin, the manager, is gone already. So I think Matt Chapman leaves, and you know where I think he's going. I'll be honest, this might be the cliche thing, but I think Matt Chapman is going to be a Met. Steve Cohen is going to want to bolster that roster even more. They just signed Scherzer, they signed Marte, they signed Canna, who Chapman's old teammate. Eduardo Escobar. I mean, the list just goes on with the Mets right now. And I think Matt Chapman would thrive in Queens. New York would love him right away. He would perform extremely well here. I feel like he's just got that type of swag with him. So I think that they possibly may hold on to him because he's not a free agent until 2024, but there's not really a reason to. If you're going to trade everybody else, you might as well trade Chapman as well. So going on to number 6, I got Carlos Santana getting traded from the Royals. He's on the last year of his contract. I believe he'll probably get traded at the trade deadline unless somebody wows them before the season starts. But right now, the Red Sox don't really have a solid option at first base, right? They got Bobby Dahlbeck, who quite possibly could be the first baseman of the future. I don't think we've seen enough out of him yet. But they have JD Martinez at DH, but JD can also play some outfield. So I think Carlos Santana can go over to the Red Sox, bring some leadership, bring some postseason experience. He's got a ton of that, obviously, with Cleveland. So I think Carlos Santana is going to be out of there. I think he would be a great fit in Boston. I really do. Switch hitter right in the middle of that lineup in between JD, all the big bats over there, Devers. I think he would be a great influence on Rafael Devers for sure. Not that he needs it, but I think it would make him even better player. So I think Carlos Santana will be out of there. So number 5, I don't think the Angels are going to do it, man. I don't. I know they signed a few guys. I think they're going to make some more moves, but I just don't see it. So I think that Noah Syndergaard is going to be out of there. He's on a 1-year contract. If he's anywhere close to the Noah Syndergaard that he has been in the past when he's healthy, a lot of teams are going to want him. And I know the Blue Jays have a stacked rotation at the moment. They got Barrios, Ryu, Manoah, Gossman. But I think Noah Syndergaard would be a great fit in Toronto. Obviously, Toronto drafted him. He was a big part of the R.A. Dickey trade to the Mets. But I think Noah Syndergaard would be great in Toronto. He would be another spark plug on the pitching side, like Barrios is, because their offense obviously doesn't need it. They got Vladdy, Gurriel, the whole team over there is awesome. Bichette. So I think Noah Syndergaard would fit really well there. He's a free agent after the season, like I said, so I feel like it will probably be a deadline move. I think he would do pretty well in Toronto. So number 4, I got Jose Ramirez finally leaving the Guardians. I think Ramirez would be the one guy who could possibly sign an extension there. He already did for a couple more years. He's not a free agent until 2024, but he does have an option each season, so that could vary. I think Jose Ramirez would be a fantastic fit in Seattle, to be honest with you. I think because he can move around the infield, you could put him at third, you could put him at second. He's played a lot of second in the past. You could probably put him at short if you had to, and you could, really count on him to be a solid offensive player. He's had a couple top 3 MVP finishes in his career. Really great fit over there. He would be great in Seattle. I mean, switch hitter. He's going to play 150 games, 160 games every single season in and out. And I think he would be another guy who has a ton of postseason experience to really help those young guys. People forget the Mariners were 1 game away from the playoffs last season. It came down to the last day of the season. So I think Jose Ramirez, this is the year that he's finally out of Cleveland, unfortunately for Cleveland fans. So number 3, I think Sean Manaea is definitely going to be leaving the A's. Like I said, I think the A's are about to go on a fire sale once this lockout's over. And I think that Sean Manaea would be a great fit in Philadelphia. They have Aaron Nola, Kyle Gibson. Zach Eflin has shown flashes sometimes, but, Sean Manaea has shown himself before. I mean, he threw a no-hitter against the Red Sox a few years ago. He's had some postseason experience, obviously in the wild card game. They didn't end up winning that game that he started, but still that's some experience there. I think he would be a great fit in Philadelphia behind Nola. I think he would kind of slide in. It would be Nola, Manaea, and then Gibson, Eflin. That's a pretty solid top 4 in your rotation, to be honest. They do have Vince Velasquez, too, who's kind of shown flashes of brilliance over the years as well. I think that Sean Manaea would be a great fit there. I think his personality, the Philly fans would really like that. So number 2, I think that this is the year that Whit Merrifield gets traded from the Royals. Obviously, like I said before, Carlos Santana's probably gone. Whit Merrifield is actually 35 years old, I believe, 34 years old, way, way older than I thought he was. Or maybe he's going to be that when his contract's up, whatever the case may be. He's that old. He's a great player, and he still hasn't played in the playoffs. As much as teams don't necessarily like to do in division trades, the White Sox clear need is second base, and that's their only need. So I think they're going to go out there and try to get the best possible second baseman they can get. And who knows him better than the White Sox? I mean, they play him 19 times a year. He gets a ton of hits off of them. I think he would be a great fit in Chicago. I really think that the White Sox already have the best roster in the entire American League. If he were to go there, that would definitely be the case. Whit Merrifield is a hit machine. He would hit leadoff in front of all those guys in that lineup. I mean, they would literally not have a weak spot on the entire roster. So I think that Whit Merrifield and the White Sox is a clear fit. And so I think that that's definitely where he's going. And the player that I think is the most likely to get traded, like that's going to make the biggest impact is Matt Olson. So I think that Matt Olson last year may have been his best offensive season. I know back in 2019 he was great, 2018 as well. But yeah, I think that Matt Olson is heading out of Oakland as well. They just everyone's going to be gone. Unfortunately for those fans out there, the green and gold team is going to look a lot different this season. And I think that Matt Olson is going to go to the Yankees. I think that this trade is going to happen before the season starts. I believe it'll happen sometime in the next month or so in March. The Yankees need a left-handed hitter to complement Joey Gallo, who doesn't strike out as much as Joey Gallo, but has just as much power as he does. Matt Olson would be a fantastic fit in the Bronx. He hits 40 homers a season in Oakland. If he was in the Bronx, he could really push Stanton's 2017 59 homers. He could get to 60. The Yankees, obviously, I talked about it, had a ton of offensive issues last season. Matt Olson is a guy that gets on base. He doesn't strike out a ton. He'll hit 270 probably. He has a ton of power. He drives in runs. He has some playoff experience. I think Matt Olson would be a great fit in the Bronx. I think it just makes too much sense for it to not happen unless the Yankees were to go after Freddie Freeman. But, there I also sound like a greedy Yankees fan that we're going to get whatever we want, just like everybody always says about us. But legitimately, I think that Matt Olson will be a Yankee, whether it's before the season or whether it's at the deadline. The Yankees need a left-handed bat. Obviously, there's the potential that they may re-sign Anthony Rizzo as well. You never know, though, that may not happen. As much as I love Rizzo, I feel like I would want Matt Olson more. So those are the guys that I believe will either get traded before the season or at the deadline. I feel like there are some other good choices there. However, I just really think that these guys are the most likely to, and they're going to make the greatest impact on these teams. They may not go to the teams I'm guessing, but I think they would make great impacts wherever they go. Let's get right into it. So now gonna go to a throwback player. So I'm doing Adam Dunn from 2004 through 2013. So Adam Dunn played during this span 4.5 seasons with Cincinnati. Then he got traded to Arizona, played there for half a year, 2 seasons with Washington, and then ended out this 10-year stretch with 3 seasons with the White Sox. So over these 10 seasons, he averaged 153 games played. So he was always on the field. 260 batting average, 37 homers, 93 RBIs, 853 OPS, 4 stolen bases. Obviously, towards the end, Dunn was more of a DH, but when he was earlier on, he was kind of in the outfield all the time because he was in the National League. He was never a great outfielder defensively, but he was never that much of a liability out there, I don't think. Those numbers, 37 homers, 93 RBIs, an OPS above 850. I mean, what else can you really ask for? That's a typical middle of the order bat. I know he struck out a lot. He was kind of one of like the first guys who was like striking out like so much, like Chris Davis or like Joey Gallo. But now that's just a normal thing. Everybody strikes out that much. So he was kind of, I don't want to say ridiculed, but he was kind of looked down upon because of his strikeout numbers. But I don't care if you strike out, as long as you're putting up numbers like he put up. That's fantastic, and you're going to really help a team there. You know how to drive in runs, you know how to get on base, because he was also walk a ton. So he was really like the first 3 true outcome player that we saw in the past like 20 years or so. He was an all-star twice. He had 3 top 28 MVP finishes. Obviously, when he was a DH, you're not really going to finish as close to the MVP finishes. But Adam Dunn was a great player. He was great with the Reds, and with the White Sox, he had one really, really bad season where he hit like 170 something. I believe only like 20 homers, but the other 2 years he was really solid. I believe he got traded to Arizona to kind of help them with a playoff push, and then they didn't end up making it anywhere. His 2 seasons with Washington, I even forgot that he played for Washington actually, but they were pretty solid as well. But something actually that's pretty odd about Adam Dunn is I believe it was in 2015, maybe he got traded to Oakland, and that was the year that Oakland played the Royals in the wild card game. Um, and that was the first time Dunn had ever been on a playoff roster. You think about the teams that he's been on, like the Cincinnati Reds were pretty good back in the day when he was on the teams. The White Sox, I mean, the Nationals, these teams were never like that bad when he was on the team. He always just ended up like missing the cusp of the playoff rosters. But yeah, so this was the first time he was ever on a playoff roster, and he actually didn't even get to play in the game. He never got to pinch hit or anything. And then he retired after the season. So Adam Dunn has actually never had a postseason at bat. You think for a guy that played as long as he did, he would have. But he didn't make it to the playoffs until his last season, and he was pretty much a bench guy at that point. And he never came off the bench in that game. So, unfortunately, he never got to play in the postseason. But Adam Dunn was a beast. He just knew how to hit home runs. He knew how to drive in runs, and he knew how to get on base. He also was pretty good at striking out, but again, that's kind of what happens nowadays. So, um, great career by Adam Dunn. This 10-year stretch was probably the best of his career. Um, and look back on him because a lot of people talk badly about him, but I think he was a great player. And he deserves more credit than he gets. So, going to wrap up today with the stat of the week. So it was just announced this week that the Yankees are going to have Paul O'Neill's number 21 retired on August 21st at Yankee Stadium. That's a Sunday game and during the day. Obviously, this is like well deserved. First of all, Paul O'Neill was a great player for the Yankees. Um, he was a big part of those 90s playoff runs. And he really deserved his number retired. He I know he played with the Reds for a while. He played with the Yankees though. He was a Yankee, man. And so the stat though, in 2001 at age 38, this was his final season. O'Neill became the oldest player in MLB history to hit 20 homers and have 20 stolen bases in a single season. So he had 21 home runs and 22 stolen bases. So the only thing is, I don't know if this number has been broken since then. But I know that at the time, this was the first player to ever do this, to have 20 homers and 20 stolen bases. He was the oldest guy to do it. So pretty amazing, 38 years old to be able to have 20 stolen bases and 20 home runs in a season.